live in a two-dimensional world.
We won't go in one direction
or see where we can zag.
We will walk through walls.
We will take a look around us.
We will not be confined.
We believe in the path of least limits.
We won't be told how to view the world.
We will experience true freedom.
We will not compromise.
We will live the game through our hands.
We will be in control of something.
We will change the system.
So the time had finally come, as 1 year had passed since the Red and Black incident, and Nintendo was ready to release their big new console for the next generation, with high hopes that it would be the system to bring them back to their former glory. The system that would this time properly bring Nintendo into the 3D age, cutting-edge, blocky 64-bit polygons and all. And so, the day of reclamation would finally arrive, as Nintendo would bestow their savior, the Nintendo 64, or N64 for short, to the public on June 23, 1996, the name of which boldly proclaiming its true strength as if a warning to any other companies' consoles who were dare willing to challenge it. However, when Nintendo designed this console with all of its modern amenities, they would end up keeping one foot firmly in the past on one of the system's features, which would end up becoming a very costly mistake. This being that the system would still be using game cartridges. You see, this was an issue because at this point in time, the age of the cartridge had passed, and the wider gaming world had moved on to a technology that went from a novel diversion to finally being properly harnessed to show off their true power. Compact discs. Compact discs, or CDs for short, were not only able to hold more data, which could not only allow for bigger and more detailed games, but also allow for voice acting to become a mainstay of gaming. But most importantly, they were just easier to program games onto, which developers obviously loved. So then why did Nintendo keep using cartridges? I mean, the only real advantage they had over CDs is that they could load up games faster and that they were cheaper to make. But like I said before, these reasons would end up becoming points that would come around to bite the company in the ass, since many of their mainstay game publishers of the previous generations would jump ship and join in on Sony's hot new PlayStation, such as Square Enix and Capcom. But despite all of these hardships, Nintendo would still engulf the system with many quality titles, with it becoming home to some of the best video games of all time, as well as genre-defining classics including Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Star Fox 64, Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye 007, and many more. But unfortunately, these quality games wouldn't be enough, as the damage that the PlayStation had inflicted was not only done to Nintendo, as the system's release would send down ripples that would end up redefining the entire video game industry landscape, with Sony as its new king, the effects of which would lead to a struggling Sega and a washed-up Atari to be blown out of the water and basically getting completely knocked out of the console race, with Nintendo being the sole survivor. And to rub salt in the wound, this was also around the time when gaming on the PC was becoming a popular alternative to consoles. But despite being once again down and out, Nintendo continued to chug along and ride out the remainder of the decade, still hoping that eventually one day they would be able to win back the spotlight.
I have the honor of introducing the world's best pure video game creator. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Nintendo's own Shigeru Miyamoto.
Let me introduce you to our new baby.
By the turn of the millennium, Nintendo was not in any type of envious position, having lost big time to the new kid on the block once already, but now the stage was set for history to repeat itself, as on March 4th, 2000, Sony would release the highly anticipated PlayStation 2. With this new console generation already in full swing, Nintendo knew it was once again time to create a new console and attempt to retake their place as the king of gaming. And this time they had planned to finally get it right, as there would be no more nauseating red and black colors or outdated cartridges to hold them back. This console would go under the codename of Dolphin and was set to blow the socks off the gaming world. Cut to 2001, one of the biggest years in gaming. Big releases, new consoles, a new competitor, and the fall of an industry giant. Yes, this turbulent year would start off with the departure of Sega from the console market, as on March 31st, 2001, their most recent console, the Dreamcast, would be discontinued and the company as a whole would go on to become a third-party development studio. With this and Atari's departure due to their poor performance in the previous console generation, this just left both Sony and Nintendo to duke it out, but not for long, as the new competitor who would enter the market would be the tech giant that helped simplify home computing and was headed by the richest man in the world at the time, Bill Gates. Microsoft. Microsoft, although already having a strong presence in PC gaming, was worried that they would lose their audience to home consoles, so they decided to join the market to make up for the potential loss of sales, as well as take a jab at their tech rival Sony. So it would be that on November 15th, 2001, the gaming world would be reintroduced to American-made consoles with the release of Microsoft's cutting-edge Xbox, thus turning the gaming landscape back into a three-way battlefield. But before this was to happen, it was Nintendo's time to shine with the release of their new gaming system, the GameCube, on September 14th, 2001. This was the company's first console to use discs, finally putting Nintendo on an equal playing field against their competitors, which sounds like a great thing to happen, right? Well, unfortunately, in true Nintendo fashion, when they took one step forward, they also took two steps back. Yes, the GameCube had discs, but it didn't have normal size discs. Instead, the system would house discs that were 1/3 the size of a standard disc. Nintendo had yet again screwed themselves over for, funnily enough, some of the same reasons that the N64 blew up in their faces: to cut costs and have faster loading times. But to be fair, another reason was to fight against piracy. Regardless, because of this, Nintendo had yet again alienated big-name game companies, but more damaging was the complete alienation of a new type of consumer. In the media world, CDs didn't just replace cartridges for gaming and cassette tapes for music, but also VHSs for movies in the form of DVDs. And this replacement allowed consoles to not just be able to play games, but also movies, meaning that they could essentially be sold as DVD players, but with much more features. And since the GameCube's disc tray was made with only the system's small discs in mind, meant that this profitable venture wasn't even an option. In the end, Nintendo would end up not only losing big time yet again to Sony by not properly adjusting to the times, they also managed to lose out to the corporate nerds over at Microsoft for their trailblazing accomplishment of bringing a proper online experience to consoles via their service of Xbox Live. Once again, Nintendo found themselves at the bottom of the totem pole, but this time with the real possibility of their future being played out in front of them with their former great rival Sega now being at the mercy of the new big names in gaming. Nintendo knew that the only way to prevent this from happening again was by not allowing a failure to happen again by any means necessary.
We gave you DS, a new Game Boy, and new games to play on them. And now you say, you want a revolution? Well, we've got one.
By 2005, Nintendo was down in the pits after not only yet again being dominated by Sony, but also by the newcomers of Microsoft. It had seemed that their heyday was over, that they were never going to be back on top, and that would just be the way it was. And by this point, the company was going to be put through the ringer yet again, since on November 22nd, 2005, Microsoft would release their successor to the Xbox 360, and usher in the 7th generation of gaming, with Sony following suit a year later on November November 11th, 2006 with the release of the PlayStation 3. Nintendo is now the third wheel in the video game industry that they had helped save, not even being considered a contender of the current console war despite being a veteran of one of the late 80s and early 90s. So instead of wallowing in their pity of not being involved with the big players anymore, they decided to take a gamble with that position. In other words, Nintendo decided that their next console wouldn't be created and marketed to the hardcore gaming audience that fell out of love with them. Instead, all of their efforts would be pushed towards the casual gaming consumer and the general masses. But this wasn't the only gamble that Nintendo was to make with their newest creation, as they weren't going to make a standard console with regular games and controllers, instead opting to make the whole thing revolve around motion control. This is the thought process that led to the system's aptly named codename Revolution. So with all these radical deviations in mind, Nintendo had gone to work on their last best chance to be on top once again.